Welcome to Promote, Profit, Publish. I'm your host, Juliet Clark, and we have another great guest today. So before we get started, I want to remind you to go over to Breakthrough Authors with an S bookclub.com. It is free. We now have a book club over on Amazon, and we have two really great picks for the month of February. Laura Biswas, The Cosmology of Love. She is a self-help love servant who loves creating love around the world. And our other book is Samantha Kawa's, I can never say her name right, book, Finding Beauty in Your Broken Pieces, which is, you guys, such a dear book. I love this book because it's all about you taking the personal responsibilities for your own healing in your hands to change every relationship in your life. Sam is a marriage and family counselor. She works a lot with couples saving marriages and also dysfunctional families, changing the way that people communicate with one another. So really a beautiful thing. Today's guest is Connie Whitman, and you probably know Connie from a couple years ago if you've been an avid listener. She is known for her high energy, passionate, heart-centered, and enthusiastic approach to sales, teaching and coaching. Connie has been the CEO of Changing the Sales Game for 20 plus years, helping business owners, leaders, and sales team build powerhouse organizations. Connie is a 3-time #1 international best-selling author, including her book, ESP, Easy Sales Process, 7 Steps to Sales Success, speaker and podcast host. She actually has 2 podcasts. Her inspired transformational tools and content ensure that business owners and salespeople grow their revenue streams through enhanced communication skills. She is thrilled to share her inspiring content on her international podcast, Changing the Sales Game, and in the Enlightenment of Change. And you guys, she is a super dynamic person. I know her from the Dames, but also she's a mentor, as am I, in the Media Magic program with Shannon Prosey. So stay tuned for Connie. Oh, Connie, welcome. It's great to have you back.
I love spending time with you, Juliet. We always have so much to talk about and so much to share. It's how I roll, how we roll, right?
I know. That's so sweet. If you could hear the pregame show, we get going and we get to the end of the hour. And it's literally not even the pregame show. Just when we talk, it's like, oh, I gotta go. Oh, I gotta go. So it's great to have you here. So I want to talk about sales and communication language today, because that's what you really do well, is that communication language. And I think a lot of authors don't understand that going into their book, they not only have to understand the language of their target audience, but their own language as well, because you're writing that line between connecting with that audience and being authentic. So can you talk a little bit about that?
So it's so interesting because humans, we have a 6-second attention span, right? And a goldfish has a 7-second attention span. So that's just a little fun fact. But so not only do we have that limited attention span, but whoever we're communicating with or marketing to or selling to, if we don't capture them, whether it's written or verbal, in those first couple of seconds, you're missing opportunities. So we really have to refine how we show up and how we're very strategic in how we communicate, and specifically to whoever our target market is for the book or whatever it is that we're writing. So that's I think is the most important thing. 6-second attention span, we're in trouble, right? Mm-hmm. The other thing is we have different filters through life. Forget about, I know you have the model that you teach your authors. I have a model, a communication style assessment, which we'll talk about during this episode, but there's other filters that we gain through life. So example would be, when you're born, your wiring of your brain is a certain way. And I'm just going to keep this super simple and say, if you're an introvert, you were born an introvert and you probably will die an introvert. If you're born an extrovert, you'll die an extrovert. So our brain wiring doesn't really change. We can work on it, enhance our communication, but the core or our bench strength doesn't really change, like your blood type. So that's foundationally #1. Second thing is, men and women, we really do communicate from a different perspective. So if my audience is predominantly women, I have to approach from a more nurturing, emotional conversation. Now, there's a lot that goes into this, but the basics, I'm giving like the tip of the iceberg here. The men usually want a little more analytics or proof of what you're saying or selling or whatever it is. So men and women in your audience, you need to know what is charging them, under the surface. So that's the second one. Third one is where you grew up. So if you grew up in a farm or you grew up in an inner city, we have filters that we see the world or we perceive the world from that frame of reference. So none of these are good or bad or right or wrong or better or worse than the other. They just are, right? So if I was raised on a farm, I'm just going to approach life and information I'm hearing differently than someone who grew up in an inner city. So location matters, right? The environment matters. How you were raised or the traditions you were raised in. The United States, we are the melting pot, right? Our whole premise of the United States was, immigrants coming in and moving across the country and what have you. So like I was raised in a very Italian household. My dad landed here when he was 20 years old. So a lot of how I approach life, I don't even realize it, is because of his influence from when he was over in Italy versus my peers who are, their parents grew up in America, plus they grew up in America. Their perspective is very different than mine. So that those traditions, those heritage things affect our filters. Well, that means it affects our target audience or whoever we're speaking to. And then the other one is generation. So if you're speaking predominantly to an older generation, you see it, right? There's 5 generations right now that are in the workforce working side by side, which is a beautiful thing, right? Think of the richness and the dynamic of information I can learn from younger people. Younger people can learn from you and I, peers like us. We've got a lot of mileage. We have a lot of knowledge and wisdom. We might not be as good as them as new things that are coming up innovatively in the technology world. So who's in my audience? I need to know where to come from. Am it more tech or is it more of the old fashioned way of thinking? So all these filters impact not only me, right, the individual, but you kind of need to know what's going on in your filters, because what's being landed or how people are receiving it matter whether we sell books or not, or programs, whatever it is that we're doing.
That is so true. And I think that's what a lot of times the newbies in our industry, when they come, they don't know how to write copy. They don't know how to do all this, and they don't think about who's receiving that information. And that's a lot of what ends up being wrong with marketing. Now, you mentioned, I have a basic structure I work with. I have, I think I just showed you here. I don't teach bank. I just want to say that right off the bat. I'm not certified in bank, but I think this is a great book for beginners in marketing because it helps you understand where you fit in, where the clients fit in, and also, what is offensive? Who are you talking to when you're talking to people? You have a little bit different one that you use. So can you tell us a little bit about what you use and how that works?
Yeah. So, I'm certified in DISC, which is very similar to bank. And I have a colleague of mine that she's certified in Myers-Briggs. And one day we were collaborating on something. And I said, I love DISC. People come into my classes though, and they go, oh, I'm an SC. I don't know what that means. So if you don't understand what something means, how can you use it? And she felt the same thing with Myers-Briggs. You're an EINJ. Well, what does that mean after the fact? Understanding information is great, but then applying it to real life becomes a whole nother layer of usage, right? And for me, if I learn something, I want to be able to use it and get some application or some repercussion from whatever that effort is that I'm putting out. So we sat down and we came up with now thousands of people have been through this model, which again, we could put in the show notes, but we came up with 5 styles and we did a couple of things different than a DISC or a Myers-Briggs. We think that 20% of the time, right? So 2 out of 10 people that we speak with speak just like us. You don't have to modify. You don't have to think, second guess yourself. Just talk. People get you 20% of the time. Well, that means 8 out of 10 people we're speaking with speaks opposite or differently than us. So we think we're being clear with our message, but they're not receiving it the way we anticipated it coming out of our mouth or in written form, whatever it might be. So that's the framework. So think about it. 20% of the time, communication's easy peasy. 80% of the time, yikes, we're kind of going the uphill battle. And then the other piece of the puzzle, when we put this together, it had to have a positive resonance or vibration to the title, because then people will embrace their strengths with that style and be more open to seeing what are potential blind spots. So I remember that when we first rolled this out and I did a speaking event, there was like 500 people in the room, and people didn't know me, right? I was the keynote speaker, whatever. They were coming in when we still did live. This was probably back in 2019. At Juliet, it was adorable. They were like, oh, I'm a heartfelt advocate. I am. They didn't even know what it was. They get this little 1-paragraph report, right? I haven't spoken yet. And I giggle. I'm like, yes, I could see you're a heartfelt advocate, right? So heartfelt advocate is the first one. They lead and live through their heart. They wear their heart on the sleeves. We're all thinking of someone, friends and family, that falls within that realm. They are your most loyal friends. They like change the least. So if you're writing a self-help book and your audience are heartfelt advocates, they're going to need a little coddling. They're going to need a little bit of reinforcement, because they're going to be, well, what if, right? That change, that element of change throws them. Additionally, your heartfelt advocate, if you're helping them move through something that's a deep-rooted hurt for them, that hurt keeps rearing its ugly head. The wound keeps opening for them. So it takes them longer. So if you're selling to heartfelt advocates, for example, I always say, you're probably just not going to make the sale in that first conversation, because they need to percolate on it. They need to see how it's going to resonate with them. They have to check in with their heart. That's the heartfelt advocate. Any questions with that one? And then I'll go through the others.
No, I know that sounds right on. And that's so much like what I read in, the bank book that I have people read is there are going to be things that you say that resonate. And then there are going to be things that you say, if you're not careful, that repel. And I just talked about that a little bit with the K, the knowledge, is this, what makes the sky blue, mommy, people. And they're great at being engineers and building bridges. But, if I had to build a bridge, I would not be,
I wouldn't ride on it, right?
Right. I wouldn't drive on it. I'm not analytical. And you have to understand, when you're talking to those type of people, they're not going to commit on that first call. They're going to, kind of like the heartful advocate, they're going to walk away and they're going to think about it, and then they're going to come back. So just knowing this helps you understand how to close the deals. And
I break that personality type, if you will. I don't love the behavioral style. It's more of how we behave or how we receive information versus a personality. But we have two. Ours, the first one's a precise assessor. Precise assessor are the engineers. They're the ones who can sit and analyze and know whether that calculation is 1/100th off, right? That the bridge in your case, like your example, would collapse. So they're the precise assessors. They like precision. They seek that perfection because they know what they're creating, right? There could be deaths if they don't create a bridge that's sustainable, or that a building that's not going to collapse. So that's the precise assessor. The blind spot for our precise assessors out there, which is of that subconscious realm that we have to be mindful of if you're selling to engineers and architects and computer programmers, that underlying is they're socially awkward. And when you approach them, you ask them a question, they want to answer with such detail and thought back at you. I'm not a precise assessor, neither are you. So we ask a question and we're thinking, okay, they didn't understand that question. Let me ask another question. So we rephrase it. And then we ask a third question because they're so slow to respond, because they're trying to answer thoughtfully. And then they look at you and they say, well, you've asked me 3 questions. Which one would you like me to answer first? So you see, that's that disconnect with innocent. We think, oh, they didn't understand the question. No, they're percolating because they want to answer with detail and thought. That's a precise assessor. They want you to understand everything that's going on in their head, but it takes them a lot longer to fire that information at us because of the precision.
Well, yeah. And if you think about it, those engineer types, they're assessing. That's what they do. They're assessing every possibility. And when I said that, I think it's a patience thing. I had a client back when I sold real estate who owned a really big aeronautical engineering company. And he actually asked me, like, what happens if a fire starts on that hillside? And I'm like, how would I know that? Like, should we get some matches and go start one?
Theory.
But that's how they process. What are all the possibilities here? And that doesn't compute with me. No.
Yeah. So see right then and there. But if my target audience, and it's funny because I work with a lot of authors too, and they'll go because they're on my podcast, right? We promote their book. And then I might do a show with them later on saying, how was your book received, right? What was the repercussion after people applied your ideas or thoughts or whatever it was? And sometimes they come back and say, I was shocked. Do you know engineers found my value in my book where I was really talking to salespeople? So it's this reverse, like, what? Pattern interruptive. Wait, who's my audience? So that's interesting too, because sometimes we create something that we think is going to resonate with style X. Meanwhile, all of a sudden word gets out and it's resonating with people we never even thought would enter our orbit. So it's almost a by accident, but now let's say that does happen. How do you shift? Because now that becomes a profitable target audience or target market. How can we tap further into that? And that's where that our own communication refinement, I think we leave less money on the table because we're capturing more because we're refined in how we're showing up for, fill in the blank with your, here's the other thing too, Juliet, when, you write a book, you go to a speaking event to promote the book. Everybody in that audience, even engineers, there's a lot of extroverted engineers. So they're talking from different frames of reference than you as the author. So when you present, you want to make sure that your flow, right? Your how quickly you speak, how slowly you speak, how animated you are versus how calm you are. You want to blend all of those in because that audience, especially if it's over 10 people, you probably have 5 out of 5 of the different communication styles. So that just makes sense what I said.
And what's interesting, and I'm going to kind of shift it a little bit. A lot of times when we work with clients, we'll go over and we'll look at their LinkedIn profile. We'll look, you and I both work with Shannon Proceeds.
Yes.
She'll go over and look at the YouTube, what's going on YouTube before our press releases are released. And a lot of times people will hire, like a coach will hire a company to write their bios, or they'll write or something like that. And when you actually look at the language in the bio, it doesn't match the person they're writing it for. It matches their style, the writer's style.
Right.
So then people are left wondering, well, why aren't people, when they read my bio, why aren't they resonating with it? Why aren't they resonating with what I'm saying over on YouTube? And a lot of times it's because the person who wrote for you didn't understand the audience the way it should be. So
Absolutely.
We do a lot of correcting with that. And by the way, you guys, Why They Buy, she has a fabulous website that you can actually take copy and run it through her AI, and it will tell you who you're speaking to. And when I actually go over and show that to people, like, this is why your copy's not working, they're stunned. Like, they have no idea.
I'll tell you, Juliet, this AI stuff, there's so much good. Be careful, right? Because you don't want it to write it for you because it still has to be your voice, even though the AI does a pretty good job of that. But I love these AI tools like that. That is brilliant application. Love it.
Yeah, that is what she did is really a brilliant application of it. So, but people don't understand the words and what else. So tell us about some of the other, you have 5 main ones you've gone over.
Yes, so they were 2. So the other one, similar to the precise assessor, is the observing designer. They're really good. I call them going down the rabbit hole. There are true innovators out there, but they're like the absent-minded professor. They never kind of finish because they're always in their head. They're always doing more research. I say they go down the rabbit hole and all we see are their feet sticking out. They need someone to give them a lifeline to pull them out. So where the precise assessor could take a lot of data and digest it and synthesize it into a report, the observing designers, but like, wait, there's more, but wait, let me look at that link, but wait, let me look at the next link. And what happens is 6 hours, and they could be very unproductive. So they too might not make a decision because they're going to say, I'm going to look into that topic and I'm going to do research before I buy that book. Meanwhile, 6 hours later, they're still doing research and they'll almost say to themselves, where did I start? Why did I go down this rabbit hole? They don't even remember it was to analyze whether they wanted to buy your book or not, right? So that's the observing designer. also socially awkward. So they're just going to be, they're not going to have great social skills typically. But again, they want that research. They love going down that rabbit hole. It's not just synthesizing information. They love the intensity of reading and reading and reading. So you better be prepared, maybe have a little more copy if you're observing designer, because they want more of that analytics to prove, they need proof that you're going to help them with fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Whatever your zone of genius is. So a little bit different than the precise assessor. The next one is the innovative organizer. I call them the CEO mentality. So the innovative organizer, they're good at decision making. So if they think your book is cool, within 2 seconds, they'll buy that book. They're going to just jump at the opportunity. They're not going to read a lot of copy. They don't need a lot of analytics. Give me the facts, give me 3 facts, and I will make a decision right here, right now. So again, you have to be more brief with them. Your pace should be a little bit faster because they're on to the next thing. Think of a CEO. They have multiple balls in the air at all times. Don't bog them down with data and analytics. Give me in 3 words what you want me to do. Why should I do it? And let's go forward and do it. The blind spot for the CEO mentality or the innovative organizer is they think to themselves, no, I know better than you. Meanwhile, what you're trying to sell them or the book you're offering them is exactly what they need. So there could be a little bit of an ego there. So sometimes we have to follow up with them to make sure that they understand what we're all about. But again, if you give them too much analytics, they're like boring and they're on to the next ball or whatever it is that they need to do in their life or their business. So that's the innovative organizer. And
I would say that's a little like me because I don't pay, like I'm not detail. If it just give me the highlights, give me the pluses, give me the minuses, and then I'll make a decision. But I'm not going to go do the most of the research myself.
And you have to be careful with the yes. So I'm going to ask you to guess at the end what I am. You'll be able to tell easily which 2. There's 2 that I scream. You'll be able to tell. But with someone like that, with someone like you, Juliet, if I'm giving you too much information with a 6-second attention span of a human, you're tuned out, man. You are long gone. You're not even part of that conversation anymore. And the other thing you want to make sure, if somebody, like if an innovative organizer says, well, I'm looking at you and someone else, right? Your program or whatever it is that you offer, you have to make sure that you hit them and hit them hard and be very direct, because you want them to make the decision, because they're either going to make no decision or they're going to haphazardly make a decision. You might not be the choice. So again, you want to hit them pretty direct, like hit them between the eyes, hit them hard, hit them fast, and they will make a decision. And the funny thing is they'll like that about you because you're not wasting their time. And then the last one is the stimulating motivator. The stimulating motivator, a little bit like the innovative organizer, they move fast, they think fast, they'll make a quick decision, but there has to be an inspiring message behind that. They want to share inspiring messages. They want to support you as the author in your book. Stimulating motivators, if they like your book, oh, they're telling 100 of their friends. They're saying to give me your affiliate link. I want to promote this book. It changed my life. They are the rah-rahs out there. They move fast. So you have to be careful because sometimes they're moving forward and they can leave a wake of angst behind them because they think they're being inspirational. Meanwhile, I'm saying, send me links. I got to get this out. And I'm putting pressure on you because you have other things that you had planned for your day, but I'm making it sound like I need it immediately. I could create angst. That stimulating motivator could create angst behind them. So they're the 5 styles. So you got to know who you're talking to. What do you think my top 2 are?
I think that the second to the last one,
innovative organizer, CEO. Mm-hmm.
I would have thought it was the last one, but you don't ever leave me with angst. So I don't know.
Okay, let's talk about that. Oh, I am the second one. So on my scale, it's a 50 to a negative 50. You fall within that realm, right? And that's just the intensity of your style. My stimulating motivators are 50 out of 50. When I coach and I teach, I want everybody to succeed. I want everybody to make $1 million. I've got your back. Like that's who I am. And then there's the innovative organizer with a 38 score, which is pretty intense. And it's like, all right, enough of the tomfoolery. We've got work to do. Let's go.
That's me. That is so me. Remember we had the discussion earlier about these people do their homework. That's me. If your my
Exactly.
homework isn't, if your homework isn't done, I'm like your mom. Like, sit down, no snack for you today, no play, no
Yeah.
nothing. Go do
And
your
you know
homework.
what's funny, Juliet, too? 40 years in sales and 30 coaching and 22 in business. How many people have I met? Have I trained, 20, 30, 40,000 people, during that time frame? It's a lot of time. So people later on, they'll say, when I first met you, I was very intimidated. And this is my response every time. You're intimidated by me? What?
I know, me too.
Are you freaking kidding me? I want everybody to win. I want everybody, if you need me, I'm there for you. And they go, yeah, but you're a little intense. I go, I am. So it's so funny how we don't see what we're putting out there, right? That people are picking up. But, and I'll tell you, who the people that say that to me are?
Who?
The heartfelt advocates.
See, yes, I would think that, because if you, even when you go into, the basic bank that I tell people to go read, those nurturers don't move that quickly. I'm bank, I'm an action, and then I'm a blueprint because of the, action oriented in organization. I'm a little bit of the nurture. It's interesting. There is a guy, and I wish I had done some prep and knows his name. He actually has something very similar to bank, and it's 4 personalities, and you take these personalities and you put them in order. And I had the opportunity to sit at his table at an event. And I said, I'm going to do it in bank terms because I don't remember his, but it's action, blueprint, nurture. And then there's that K. And there was something about that last one that I just had to ask him, like, is this something from my childhood? And he was like, more than likely, yes. We haven't explored that a great deal, but a lot of times that's what that one where you don't communicate with is something that went on in your childhood that kind of, backed you up. Yeah, you put up blocks from it. So I always thought that was really interesting that, and he had me take the cards right at the table, and he said, describe your mother with these cards. Describe your father with these cards. And we were kind of sitting there testing it, like, what would you say the order is for your mother? What would you say the order was for your father? Now, what is it for you? And so it was kind of an interesting exercise, but it was very thought-provoking for him because nobody had ever asked him that before. And he was like, yeah, I think there's some validity there too. So
see, and that's what we talked about before we started the recording. All of these style things and bank and what predictive index or Myers, whatever it is, I take if somebody says to me, I have an assessment, I go, oh, give it to me. I want to peel back that onion because sometimes we all have blind spots. You don't know what the blind spots are because they're blind spots, right? So if someone gives me like bank, because I've taken bank too, and I think, oh yeah, not a surprise, but there might be a sentence in there where I'm like, oh, no one has ever said that. That's interesting. So as you take, I think you should always explore self, right? Develop self. That personal growth is so important because you never know what you're going to learn from that next model that you take, or reinforces that, oh yeah, that is my strength. Oh yeah, that is my blind spot. I forgot about that blind spot. I was working on it. I stopped working on it. So again, it's almost like it brings full circle. And the other thing you just said that made me think of something. About 2 years ago, someone said to me, and I'll use DISC, right? They said, are all of your friends IDs or DIs, which are like us, very direct, move fast, think fast, big picture. Please don't get me in the weeds. I'd rather put pins in my eyes, right? So they said, is everybody like you? And I really thought about it, Juliet. No one had ever asked. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Yeah. No, most of the people closest to me, my husband, my kids, they're all opposite of me. And so I thought about that. So that night I was like, okay, this is interesting. Why am I repelling all the guys? But this is why. I personally crave what I don't have. So an example would be if someone just shares something with me and I think, oh, I wonder if I should use that for my business. I'm ready to make a decision without doing zero research. I'll go to my husband, who's a CSSC, very, very detailed, loves researching, all of that. I'll go, hey, somebody told me about blah, blah, blah. Look it up for me. See what you think. Report back. And he goes, okay. And then he'll do a ton of research and say, you know what? I think the price point, it's worth trying. Or are you out of your mind? What were you thinking? You don't need this. So that you see, I've learned to surround myself with those that are opposite of me because I know that's a big blind spot. So I was craving that without even realizing it. So I challenge everybody listening, pay attention to who's in your orbit. Typically, or what I've seen is people are opposite of you, marriage, they're opposite of you because you need that balance because they cover your blind spot. And it's an intuitive thing. It's not even conscious. Yes. Isn't that fascinating?
That is fascinating because if I think about my business, like you're in my world, we have a lot of people that are similar in our, like all of my people in my world are the same as me, I would say, like in the business,
because we're business owners.
Right. But if you look, like I when I was married, I'm a server, he's a seller. And if you look at my kid, my daughter is exactly like me. My son is like not anything like me. So it's just kind of, but what's funny is if you look at the dynamics of the familial relationship, my son is very, very close to me. So he's probably getting something he doesn't have himself.
And it's interesting because my one son, who's very much like my husband, but he sees us interact. He sees us in our business, right? Our roles in business. So he comes to us for different things. So detailed emails, is this clear? Don't come to me because I don't want to edit anything. Again, I'd rather have pins in my eyes. But he'll come to me and say, I'm thinking about approaching my boss, and should I approach it this way? I want to make sure she understands me, but I don't want to be emotional. So I'm like, get your notepad out because he needs to take notes, right?
Right.
It's so interesting that they know who to go to for the information they're seeking. But you have to remember, I've been teaching my kids. I taught them DISC when they were in middle school because they had to present. So I taught them about DISC, and I said, you have people in your audience, your peers, that are all of these different styles. So you have to approach, so you give everybody a little bit of something so that they tap in and engage with you. And they were like fascinated by this. So it's just really funny how they grew up with it. That's why they know who to come to for what. But think about that too within your family. This is a great tool.
That is so interesting because my daughter is the youngest manager at Whole Foods, like all around. And she is a bit of a hothead. So she will literally, I've taught her, take a deep breath, and then she'll call me and go, please tell me how to handle this in a way that doesn't allows me not to kill people and lose my job.
Right.
And so we'll talk it through. My son doesn't really have problems like that because he doesn't have the high pressure job. She does. But yeah, it is interesting. And it's not just, I'm going to go to mom because I don't want dad to know. Mom and dad have different skill sets. So that really is. And the funny thing about my kids is my daughter's married, my son's not, and he's older. He goes to my daughter for dating advice, and she's like, why are you asking me? I dated like 3 people and I married my husband.
I love it. I think that's adorable. The other thing too, people listen and they say, oh, well, then that means like I'm a heartfelt advocate. I could never own a business. Why?
That's not true.
Of course you can. That's a ridiculous thing. Is it going to be a little bit harder for you to say no to people? But can you do it? Sure you can. You just have to develop that skill. So I am not a detailed person. So my husband has to edit everything for me. If I have a very new client and it's an important email, I'll give it to him and say, is it grammatically correct? Does it make sense? Is it because I fire direct? Is it enough information? That kind of thing. And he edits it for me. So, but here's the thing. I write manuals, right? I could teach in detail because my dad was an engineer. So from when I was a little girl having to make a decision, I would say, Dad, what do you think? And he'd say, let's take notes, write the pros and the cons. We called the Benjamin Franklin, the little T, right? So what on the left side is the pros. What are the pros of that decision? What are the cons of that decision? Now you're analyzing, you can make an educated decision. Well, think about that. He's did that my whole life. I don't know how to think any other way. Is it intuitive for me? No, I was not born that way, but I learned it because it's just how you think now, because that's how I was taught. So again, we can learn to maximize or cover our blind spots by seeking correct help, right? Seeking the right people to help us.
That is so true. Because when I was growing up, ADHD wasn't a thing. And I'm definitely, if you know me, I'm like ADHD all over the place. My dad taught me to make lists and be really organized. And to this day, I still do that. It's how I organize and manage everything. And had that not, I probably would have been,
Can you
all over the
imagine?
place.
Can you
Yeah, I
imagine?
can't.
Great
Yeah, I
skill.
probably would have been on drugs like everybody else in the world.
Yeah, no, it's a great skill. But see, that's the other thing too. We forget our parents really know us. So they do know how to ground. Like I know what my kids need. They're very different, but I know what they both need and how I need to communicate with them. Otherwise, my message, my one, I could be very direct with. The other one, if I did that, he would be in a puddle in his room. He would never come out because it's too mean for him to receive that message. So you really have to understand who's in your audience because here's the thing. Do we ever want to offend anyone? No. Do we
No.
want people to buy from us? Yes. But
Yes.
how do we, and I hate the word because I'm sales. I hate the word convince or persuade. I
Oh,
don't
you
use
can't.
those words.
No.
If you're the right person for me, I want to make sure I'm articulating that perfectly. So you're making a very solid, sound decision. And it's not just a crapshoot because I sold you a bag of goods. You really understand what you're buying. So, but again, who am I speaking to so they understand what I'm saying? It really goes down to the communication piece. So important, Juliet, so important.
It does. And I think where people get really caught up in the sales process too is they're not closing correctly, but they're also giving their power away in a sense.
Agree.
And that's one thing I tell people all the time in the sales realm is when we have a call together, it's as much about me deciding if I'm going to take you as if I'm going to make you an offer and you're going to say yes. And sometimes we don't have a meeting of the minds, and that's always okay with me because it's the universe telling me that there's something there that wouldn't have worked.
Yes.
So, and I think once you can flip that script and come from a more empowered place that you are deciding on the call if you're going to make an offer, you just don't have an offer you're going to give everybody. I think that really flips the script and takes sort of the desperation out of sales too. If you can reconcile with, okay, that didn't happen and it wasn't me personally, it was just, I didn't have what fit for them, and that's okay. So I really like that too.
And here's the thing, what you just said is so important because if they're not the right fit for you, and you really do know that in your soul, they're just not the right fit. If you take them on, they're going to take up so much of your space and time and mental capacity that you're going to be losing even better business over here, or we end up leaving money on the table because we're putting our energy in the wrong place. So I remember, gosh, I was in business maybe 3 years. I had little babies at home. I mean, we needed we needed income, right? I was just starting out, and it was about a $20,000 contract. It was a lot of money back in the 90s. And it just wasn't a good fit for me, the organization. It was a company. And I walked away from the business, and he was like, no, but I want you. And I'm thinking, you are not the right person for me. And thank goodness I didn't take that business, because number one, he would have just monopolized so much of my time, and it would have been more than the 20,000, right, of effort that I would have had to put out. And more business came in because I walked away from that. But you can't come from a place of desperation, because one door closes, really another one opens. But you have to be true to yourself, and you have to know if you could truly help that client. You can't just take business because, well, it's money. You can never say no to a deal. Yeah, you can. And make sure that it's the right deal for you as well as for the person. And here's the other thing. If you're the right person for me, I'm going to get referrals from you on the back end. If you're not the right person for me, you could do some bad publicity out there for me and end up hurting me even further than all of the effort I gave you. So that's another like word of wisdom. Yeah.
That's really true. And especially before I owned this business, I had a brokerage. I worked as a real estate broker, and people were always stunned. Like, you fired a $1.7 million listing. And I'd be like, well, it should be 1.5 and they're not listening. And I'm done spending promo money on people who won't listen. Yeah. And so, part of that is learning to set good boundaries for yourself as well, and your business. So where can we find this quiz so we can find out more about what you do in communication?
I'll give you the link. I think I sent it to you so they could go directly to, but if they're like, I'm so curious, it's just changingthesalesgame.com. Right at the top, there's a little red button and it says communication style assessment. Click on that. It'll take you right to the assessment. They'll get 2 reports, Juliet. One is the highest score, like my 50 out of 50 for stimulating motivator. To give you the highest score, you'll get a report. Very important to know because we want to know what our natural superpowers are because we want to lean into that and develop that even better, right? Even further. Flip side, your lowest score, which for me is the observing designer, the one that likes to do the research, go down the rabbit hole. I think I have a negative 50 on that one. So I have none, but that's why I hire people to do that stuff, right? But anyway, you'll get the lowest score, which I think is more important. Remember, I will never become an observing designer ever. I don't want to put the effort out. Know that though, to think, who do I need to hire or who do I need to show this to, right? To cover that blind spot. Who am I speaking to that's an observing designer? This is the important lesson. What do I need to do so my message lands for them properly?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Connie. This was really great.
I love you. Thank you for having me.